Thanks to Forsaken, Destiny 2 has successfully reached Bungie's goal to partially revive their game, though for something to grow and most importantly, for it to not recede, taking good care is needed. Well, this has been the case for the player versus environment half of the game, and half is metaphorical. The PvP side has been suffering a lack of content and fundamental corrections. In fact, the player population has been slowly but increasingly shifting from PvP activities to PvE ones, as shown in the graphic, or just quitting. It is clearly the direction Bungie is giving the game, if not the purpose, this is at least the effect. In a year, all the content added has been exclusively focused on the PvE, if we consider that the last patch adding something new to the Crucible has been the 2.0.0.1 released on the same day Forsaken launched, on September 4th, 2018, thanks to which new maps were added, for instance Retribution, Reworked, and Wormhaven, even though they had already been available during Year 1 on PS4, so it can't really be considered a fresh addition, but I'm not trying to track Bungie's last substantial update to the Crucible, which anyway goes back in time. This is not my point, and sure, during this year, fixes have been addressed to issues concerning fan-loved game modes such as Breakthrough and adjustments to supers. My point is trying to understand why Destiny's great potential is now being unleashed and how it could be. First of all, I would define content starting off from what I do not consider content. Pinnacle weapons and quests. I feel like these are built-in game objectives which would exist even if the Crucible was not a thing. Certainly though, some weapons are specifically designed for it, such as Revoker, or at least more versatile here rather than there, but it's not enough to stand out on its own as a PvP element and as a satisfying addition, especially if looking at the bigger picture. I would call them semi-content. I don't consider content patches either, of course, but seeing how incredibly little we've been getting, I've been wondering if this gift could be considered so, but it surely is not. I would instead define content, new maps, game modes, that put creation and imagination into something concrete, something original and not seen before, or just something already seen but re-elaborated. For instance, about maps, an environment where the player can interact and develop a more vertical, dynamic, replayable and open gameplay, which differs from the usual flat map design Destiny 2's current maps suffer from, where just one spot is the main focus of the entire match, and this is also sometimes consequence of the previous 4v4 player map design. Variety is key, and so should be for game modes. Why not bring back Rift? Introduce something as old as simple, like Catch the Flag, or vehicles. This all would be something refreshing, or just game modes with enlarged teams. I'm just coming up with ideas whose realization in game could not be granted, as it needs to be adapted. But Bungie doesn't even seem to have ideas either, as impossible or weird they may sound. Although rotating events such as Iron Banner show a renewed interest in PvP for its rewards, and so do other recycled activities, it all is just temporary and not enjoyable. Forsaken was a huge step toward the right direction, but the Destiny experience isn't purely a PvE one, it should focus on PvP as well, and no other game can be what Destiny is. Neglection, slowness, delay, laziness, and no prompt response to issues are the reason this game is not giving the correct experience to players more interested in the Crucible. Its average daily population doesn't even reach 500,000 out of 50 million tracked players, and the shift seems to be internal rather than external, which would not only give economic profit to the game, but also to the players who would bump into more easygoing and casual opponents and no sweats all the time. There are surely fundamental flaws, like the original 4v4 map design that does not work in a 6v6 environment, bad spawns, very bad spawns, and the non-existent skill gap given how the game is fought, which isn't bad and instead should be fun, but worsened by the presence of certain weapons and abilities and rampant supers boosted by mods, opulence of heavy ammo, etc. I think a big issue is also part of the community. Sticking to the meta is an easier way to win and have fun, preventing others from it. A game should grant the slightest fun even when losing. The fact that an option is available doesn't mean it's mandatory and excusable. The more a game ages and delasts its content, the more it gets stale, leading to depopulation, sweats, players stacking up, sweats stacking up, slower matchmaking, which urges its imbalancing mechanic. Meta is inevitable in a game that gives a huge amount of options to the players such as Destiny, but the time Bungie takes to balance out what needed is just too long, months, and frustration is all it creates. I feel like more players have started using sniper rifles, which require more skill compared to the rest, and stopped sleeping on them only after the introduction of Tatara Gaze and Izanagi's Burden, and most of all, after the Revoker quest. It feels like part of the community needs an input to recognize something's value. This happens particularly if an influencer is followed and a network effect is created. But some sandbox elements are just wrong in the concept, such as non-heavy grenade launchers, which need a rework because of how easily they can be spammed and in my opinion shouldn't be occupying both the slots of the same player. Or fusion rifles, which seem to be either too strong or too ineffective, or even the supercharged plate barrage, just to mention some, at least on console. I agree with the doctrine of don't just nerf but also buff the rest, supported by the differences in behavior weapons have on console and PC and which should get a different attention depending on the place they reside in. Among the countless weapons in armor this game has got, just a few tens are in use. In conclusion, Destiny 2 will never be a perfect PvP environment because of its construction, but it can surely be healed. A player progression is based on their capability of improving from mistakes, but when these mistakes are induced by the way the game works and are inevitable, then it gets frustrating because it's totally out of control from the player, and what's worse is that most of it could be fixed. Hoping for Shadowkeep, just as we hoped for Opulence, we'll be seeing. Thanks for watching.